And welcome you back to the Born to Climb podcast. And in this episode, I sit down with J.M. Ryerson. He's a best-selling author, leadership coach, and host of the Let's Go Win podcast. And in this episode, we dive into the power of showing up as your true self, both in life and in leadership and in your business, and why removing the masks that we wear is so critical to building meaningful connections. JM also shares transformative lessons from his personal journey, including how clarity and values saved his marriage and shaped his approach to leadership. I know you're going to enjoy it, so let's go ahead and dive in. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, and I am here with J.M. Ryerson. J.M., great to have you on Born to Climb.
Brother, great to be here. It was fun just chatting off air, you being an Albertan, me being a Montanan. Like, I know the world you grew up in, and it's that's always so refreshing. So anyway, thanks for having me, brother.
For sure. Yeah, great to make this connection. So I was watching some of your stuff online, and you were talking about, you were talking to leaders, and you were talking about the best thing that they can do is actually just show up as the most authentic version of themselves. So I want to talk about that, why that's important, and why is it so difficult for us to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I find it hard for people because we've been taught that we want to fit in. And it starts really early, like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, where you want to fit in, so you start to kind of mask who you really are. And you compromise here, compromise there. At the end of the day, it becomes really tiresome being somebody that you're not. It's so much easier when you just show up as who you are. It takes less energy, less time, and people actually will fall in and follow you, and they'll be a part of it, and they'll believe in you. But I think people are scared to really show who they are because they've been taught, back then I showed up as who I was and I got shamed for it, or I got made fun of. And so people really start to put masks on along the way. And one of the things I said in my first book, I'm like, look, masks are meant for parties. They're not meant for the real world. Like, take that stuff off and just show up as you. And when you can do that, James, as you know, it's so freeing. When you can just really take off all those layers and just show up as who you are, it's really easy because you're not trying to be anything that you're not. That's the easiest thing to be. But I think for some people, they've been conditioned so long, that's scary. I don't want to be vulnerable. Even that word vulnerability is scary. It's like, yeah, I get it. I understand why there's a fear there, but man, just give it a shot and see how it feels.
What would you say, JM, to, let's say, somebody young who's listening right now, and they might look at that and think, it's fine for you to say that, JM, you're older, you're further established in your career. Hey, I'm a 20-something just getting started. I can't afford to be myself, so to speak.
Yeah, I would relate to him and say I was in your shoes. I remember when I was my first company, I wore suit and tie, buttoned up, and I wanted to sound a certain way, look a certain way. It was so much effort at the end of the day, and it wasn't who I was. So what I would tell that person is, look, you don't have to show up as anything but who you are. That's why whoever hired you or why you started the company, people are following because they believe in who you are. And I would just say, it doesn't have to be that hard. Just try it on for a day. Like today, I'm wearing a hoodie and jeans. That's a simple kid from Montana. I'm comfortable doing this. This is who I am. I'm not wearing the suit and tie. Now, that's just something to wear, but it's just easier to just be me and be comfortable with who I am. So to that 20-year-old, I'd say, I get it. I've been there. And let me save you a bunch of time and a whole bunch of mistakes. Just try it on for 90 days and just see how it goes. And what you're going to find is your growth will accelerate quickly because you have so much more energy to put into other projects instead of trying to look a certain way or fit in a certain way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize, they don't make the connection of confidence and authenticity, that when you can get to that place that you're okay with who you are and to show up in an authentic way, your confidence really begins to steamroll at that point.
Yeah, it's a good point, James, because I wasn't raised this way, so we're clear. I was raised vulnerability No, bro. I was raised like boys don't cry, mask those emotions, push them way down. And then somewhere along the line, I realized that's all nonsense and it's going to end real poorly, which in several instances it did because I was doing that. And to your point of it, the confidence comes from you don't have to think about, oh, what am I supposed to be now? You can just be you. And when you can let that all it's like a layer. You just take it off. It's so freeing. And it's just one of those things, like you said, now you can just be confident in this is who I am. And people that like me and want to be around me, they're going to be there. People that don't like me, which, by the way, and let me just help you with that one, there's going to be both sides. I don't care. Mother Teresa had people that didn't like her. That's just a fact. So you're not going to please everybody. Once you kind of let that go and you show up as the best version of you, now you want people like you, of course, I get it, but they're not always going to, and that's okay. And you're right. Now your light shines brighter, you're more confident, and now you get to serve in a greater way than you could if you were trying to act a certain way.
So let's talk a little bit about your, in a sense, transformation. We grew up probably in a very similar time, very similar type of communities. And so at what point did you get that lesson that, you know what, I've got to stop wearing these masks?
You know, I mean, it's happened several times, as you and I were talking off air, several iterations and evolving always. But I would say it was one of the low points where my wife and I, who have been married 19, almost 20 years now, but about the 6 to 7 year mark, we were separated for a year. And in large part, it was because I wasn't being the authentic human being. I wasn't being who she married. And obviously we both had our faults in it, but it was one of the greatest lessons I could experience because my family's my everything. When it comes down to it, Lisa and my two boys, they are everything. They're the reason I get out of bed every morning. They're the reason I work so hard. I mean, they truly are what fill my bucket. And so with that being threatened, because I wasn't being who I was, because I was trying to please so many others, that finally hit me in the smack in the face. Like, look, you're about to lose what you say means everything to you. There's got to be a better way. And so that was really, that was in my early 30s where I said, enough is enough. I want to just show up as the most, authentic, best version of myself. And of course, I stumble along the way. We all do. And I continue to work on it every single day where, you know what? I'm changing and as I get older and, maybe likes and tastes change, but I'm going to be completely open about that and not be ashamed about, look, I used to love, let's say, working out 2 hours a day. Now I only like to work out 30 minutes a day. That's okay. We all change. And I think the more that we can accept that, the easier it becomes. So, yeah, it's funny when we have these really hard moments in life, those are when we really should say thank you. And so being separated from my wife was one of those moments. It sucked, man, for a year. It was awful. And yet I'm so thankful that it happened because now our relationship has never been better because we communicate and we talk about our fears and our likes and all those things that we weren't doing early on in our marriage.
Can you give one example of when you went through that time and you thought, I got to start being more authentic, more vulnerable? How did that translate practically for you in the context of that relationship?
In the relationship, it was real easy. We sat down and we were very clear on our non-negotiables. Here, and this is going to be so silly when I say what the two main ones were for both of us. For me, it was just until 9 a.m., all I wanted was just happiness. That was it. Look, after 9 a.m., you can tell me the sky is falling and I can deal with it. But I have this morning routine and I like to be happy and just kind of in my, my mantras, my meditation, my cold plunge, all the things that I do. I just wanted that non-negotiable until 9 a.m. Unless it's something where the world truly is stopping and I need to know, just give me that. And then you can complain all you want. That was my one for her. For me, it was very simple. No drinking and driving. How easy is that? How simple is that? It's not even that I was doing it very often, but one was too much for her. And it was a threat to her safety and to our kids. And it was so simple. Between Uber, taxi, don't drink, have a driver, whatever it was. When we communicated those two non-negotiables, it opened up like, oh, that's not that big a deal on either of our parts. But if you were in the marriage prior to that, there was so much conflict. There were so many things going on because we weren't really just addressing things that really were bothering us. And you know what's so funny, James? I'm sure you've experienced this as well. It happens often in relationships where it's like, you're not really bothered about the thing that you're arguing about. It was some non-negotiable, some boundary was crossed, and you just didn't have the gumption, you didn't have the bravery, whatever it was, to talk about it. Once Lisa and I did that, it was like, oh, well, that's not so bad. Okay, cool. Let's get to work. And after that, brother, we communicate, and it's been so much easy. It's just easy.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear. So from there then, how did these changes begin to spill over into your professional life? You know, you run a company, but not only that, you teach leaders, you train leaders. So I'm curious about how that evolution spilled over to them.
Yeah, I think the first day when I came in not in a suit and tie, that was probably this first shock. Like, whoa, what's this guy doing? He's wearing jeans and like a T-shirt or whatever. That was probably shock one. And then when I just opened up about, what was happening in my personal life and really let them in, that would be a great fear for a lot of leaders. Gosh, if I let people truly in, they're going to judge me. They're going to use it against me. And by the way, yes, a couple of people will. That's okay, in my opinion. The vast majority could relate, could understand, and actually it flipped everything on its head where they're like, oh my gosh, I have gone through something similar. And whether they lend advice or they say we're here for support or they say we're behind you, it just flipped everything so fast because I was able to say, look, here's everything. I'm not hiding anything. Here it all is. And Ray Dalio talks about it as radical transparency. That's something that he operates with. I'm a huge fan of. And I believe in that, where I don't want to have to hide anything. Here I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And like I said, the vast majority, the good folks that you want on your team, they're going to get behind you. There will be a small minority of folks that might use it against you. And here's the great news. Now you know who truly should be on your team, and now you know who shouldn't be. And that was one of the greatest gifts I could receive as well. Just being completely authentic and vulnerable, like here's looking under the kimono, and people are like, okay, I can get behind this guy now. I truly believe in who you are. Before, it may be because I could provide an opportunity or money or whatever it was. Now they could really believe in the vision that I was portraying. They could believe in the direction I was going. So it just, that small change, and that's why vulnerability was the first chapter of my first book, because it's the most profound lesson I learned in my professional career, is just to be 100% vulnerable.
Well, that leads into something that I know you talk about, actually you and I both talk about from a leadership perspective, and that's about caring about your staff, being kind to them, and appreciating reward and recognition. And I've seen it happen where a leader does do that, like they care about their staff, they're taking genuine interest, but they themselves are not vulnerable, and it still creates a disconnect. So in other words, it's like they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're doing the right thing, but because they don't match it with the other part of it, that's being able to just be vulnerable, then they're struggling to make that connection. And that's so important with your employees because, as you know, right, it comes back down to there's a reciprocity to work, that it's not just I pay you, you work for me, but it's also, no, I'm here for you. I've got your back. I'm a person. And people respond to that in a great way.
Yeah, we're energetic beings. People feel that energy. And so the example is, if I invite you into my home, I'm bringing you into the sanctity, like the safe haven. This is my everything. That is opening me up to saying, I truly trust you. And let's say that leader was welcomed into, I don't know, their vice president's home. Okay, they go in, the vice president welcomes the CEO into their home, and they really are welcoming them. Well, if that's not reciprocal, that's going to be felt. You're going to feel like there's this wall between you because they showed you everything. Here's my family, here's my hopes, here's my dreams. If you don't do it, that relationship will end in divorce eventually. That's just the way it works. And we've seen it, unfortunately, many, many times through the years, or fortunately, I guess, to give us examples, where those leaders that truly say, here I am, I'm showing you everything, guys, they are long-term great leaders. Those that put on a facade and try to say certain things, or it's an ego thing, it doesn't last long, even if there's a big spike. And so that's what I would tell these leaders is don't be afraid to do it. Now, does that mean don't have boundaries? Of course, you should have boundaries. We all need to. However, letting people in to know who you really are, what your hopes and dreams are, just like you're asking them, that's the way we work. We're energetic beings, first and foremost, before we are any other title that we put on our business card.
Yeah, absolutely. I found too that when leaders they show up and they can be vulnerable, right? Doesn't mean that you have to be friends, but that you can be vulnerable, you can be a person. Because often, especially in our society, people will look up to their leaders, unless they've done something, horrendous in the workplace. But people will look up to their leaders. But when the leaders can then be human, it lowers the distance of authority, right? And not only that, from an inspiration perspective, people then look at the leader like, they're actually a lot like me, which means maybe I can be like them. And there's an inspirational factor in that. I want to talk about mindset for a moment. So, especially you mentioned morning ritual. I'd love to hear about yours, or maybe yours has evolved over time. Mine seems to change year by year. But yeah, let's talk about morning rituals. Let's hear about yours. And when you're teaching people, what do you help them to understand about the importance of it?
Yeah, I'll start with teaching people because my morning routine became so long that I finally had to realize this is A, it's not teachable, and B, I need to shorten it. I need to give myself the grace. So I teach people to do three things. Take care of your mind, your body, and your soul. And I say give it 5 minutes for each. So for your mind, read a book for 5 minutes. Listen to this podcast. Do something that's challenging your mind. Okay, cool. Moving the body, everybody's heard it. I don't need to say much more about it. Just move the body. We all need that. That's good for both our mindset and it's good for our physicality. And then the spirit or the soul part, that's been something I really had to find because my relationship with spiritual or soul, it wasn't one that was like, yes, I wanted to do this. I was raised Catholic as a Catholic or Catholicism. And for whatever reason, it just didn't resonate with me in my younger years. And so I went through a period of time where I didn't really have that. And then I found Buddhism and meditation, Taoism. These are things that really made sense to me. And here's the thing. I don't care. I don't care if it's reading the Bible or taking a hike or walking the beach. Do something that feeds that soul, that allows you to quiet your mind and truly just to be with yourself. And so that's what I coach people on. Just give yourself 15 minutes a day, 5 minutes for the mind, 5 minutes for the body, 5 minutes for the soul. Mine is a bit more substantial. It's still 2 to 2.5 hours long. And something that I'm really trying to do this year, I am doing this year, is being okay not doing all the steps to do 2.5 hours because it's impractical, honestly. And so as good as I feel doing it, I'm trying to scale it back to where, let's say I do 45 minutes for the day. Is that okay? I think so. As long as I'm doing just like I'm coaching on, taking care of the mind, the body, and the soul, if it's good enough for my clients, it should be good enough for me. Now, do I add in, my 11 minutes breath work, 11 minutes of meditation, 11 minutes of yoga? Yes, I do that because that particular 33 minutes is sacred to me. I have a supplement routine that I do because I do want to have a longevity of life. I want to be able to play pickleball at 90 years old. These are things that I want to do. But I'm really giving myself grace, James, to say, you know what? Maybe it doesn't all get done in the morning, and maybe it doesn't get done at all, and that's okay. Just go out, give your very best, show up as the best version of you, and then check in with your body. Do you need a meditation right now? Do you need to journal a little bit? Do you need to speak to your son or daughter, your wife, whatever you need? And that is starting to make a lot more sense to me, to say it doesn't have to be so regimented. I understand why I did it for so many years. Now it's become habitual. Now I want to see what I can slowly scale back and pour into other areas of my life.
You mentioned cold plunging. How often do you do that?
Every day. I love it. I don't know if you cold plunge, James. I will say I had heard about it probably, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And I had sporadically done it. And every time I got out, I was like, oh my gosh, you feel like you're just set on fire in a good way, ready to go for the day. And I finally said, you know what, babe, I just need to have a cold plunge at the house. The cold showers I don't like doing. I was doing those for many years, but I don't like the cold water coming down on my head. And so now I just do 3.5 minutes every day. If I feel like doing it twice a day, I'll hop in. It's one of those it's a supercharger is ultimately what it is for both my mind and my body.
I had avoided cold plunging for years, and I did it once when I was in Latin America, funny enough. And, I'm somebody with red hair. We just feel pain more. So that was like my other excuse of like, well, I'm not going to do it. But about 1.5 years ago, I belong to this workout group with a bunch of guys. We work out early in the morning, and, they're like half my age. And I was so sore all the time. And I thought I should try cold plunging. So I just bought one, put it in my place here. And after 2 days, I just became a convert. I was became an evangelist for it. I started telling everyone, you got to do this, because all my pain was gone. It was magical in that way. All my pain was gone. And then, like you said, the rush you have when you come out of the cold plunge, I'm not sure what temperature you do it at, but the rush you have, the dopamine rush when you get out, it's a high that you ride for a bit. And the other reason I love doing it is because I don't want to do it every day. Every day I come back in from the workout, and it's freezing cold here right now where I am in Denver. And then you think, I don't want to get in a cold plunge, but you're like, but I'm doing it. But I don't want to, but I'm doing it. And just forcing yourself to do that thing that's hard. And it's been a great addition to my life. So yeah, for anyone listening, if you've ever thought about getting into cold plunge, and maybe you're like, I live in an apartment, I have this portable cold plunge that I put in a bathtub. We have a second bathroom here with a bathtub, and it gets squished up a bit, but it's like 100 gallons, and I jump in it. It's awesome.
You asked real quick, so I'll tell you. I keep mine at 45 degrees. I found that to be what I really enjoy, as much as you can enjoy it. And here's the funny thing I'll also say. The first 30 seconds, I don't care how many times you cold plunge, the first 30 seconds are going to suck. And then there's a state of euphoria for the next however long you go, 2.5, 3 minutes, where you feel incredible. So if you can get by, it's kind of like everything in life. When you first start, it probably isn't going to be awesome, but once you get going, it gets really good. The other thing you said with the dopamine spike, I don't know if you read this, but they did a study where if you drink alcohol, you get a 9.5-minute dopamine spike, okay? If you do a cold plunge, you get the same dopamine spike for 2.5 to 3 hours. The same dopamine spike. So instead of having a beer, put it down, hop in the cold plunge. And it's remarkable that something like this naturally can do that for you. You can have that feeling. So I'm with you, man. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I do mine at 47, and I break the time into the first 15 seconds are all out panic. I just know I got to get through that, and then the next 30 seconds are like what you explained, and then you finally settle back down. But also, if you're thinking of getting into cold plunging, well, you should probably consult a doctor first. So don't listen to us because we're not doctors. But It's work your way into it. I started at 60 degrees and worked my way down. I do find that if I take a break and then I go back into 47, it's really cold. But then day 2's okay, day 3's fine, and it gets better. So, yeah, love it. Love it. So you work with a lot of business owners, a lot of small business owners. And I want to ask, in your work, I know everybody's different, but if there were one or two key things that consistently pop up as the thing that holds people back from growing their businesses, and talking about them, not so much whether it's their sales systems or marketing or things like that, but about them, what would that be?
Yeah, this I'll ask 1,000 companies the same question, and this isn't the first time you're going to hear this word, and I know it's kind of trendy, but it's so important. What is the culture of your company? And one executive will say a list of words, and I'll ask the next executive. It'll be a whole different list, and it'll be the next executive, and it'll be different. If you're not clear on exactly the cultural values of who your company is, which, by the way, I'll give a story of how unclear I was in company 2, it's just not going to work. It's not going to allow you to work as effectively and as streamlined as you can. So it's the first thing I go to work with companies on is, what's your one sheet? And people are like, what's a one sheet? All a one sheet is who we are, why we exist, the core values of who we are, how we behave, and what are we trying to accomplish. And what it allows a company to do is to get everyone rowing the boat in the same direction. Now, I would also suggest make sure that you only have no more than 3 core values. And here's why. We have a diminishing return after 3. For whatever reason, our brains remember 3, like Snap, Crackle, Pop, the 3 Stooges, 3 Amigos. Like, you remember 3, no problem. But once you get past 3, you start to forget. And so what happened to me, James, you and I were talking about speaking, and at my second company, I was literally on stage we had about 1,500 employees or so, and we had 6 core values. Now, mind you, I was one of the executives that created the core values in that boardroom. And I got to 4, and I forgot the last 2. Now, how can I possibly expect the newest hire that we have in the audience to know our 6 core values if I don't even know it? And so I did a quick informal poll off stage. Literally 99.9% of the company didn't know what all our core values were. It was a very, very valuable lesson. The next year, came back. We had reduced it down to 3, did the same speech. Good news, I remembered all 3 core values. And when I did the same informal poll, over 90% of the audience knew what our core values were because we talked about it before every single meeting. This was just something that was a part of our habit. And so everybody can remember those 3. So that is my favorite thing to do, is just get people really clear on who you are, what your core values are, how you behave, so people know how they're supposed to show up and what we're trying to do. And that starts everything in motion so that people can double, triple. That's why I get hired, is to double or triple somebody's revenue. And I'm like, okay, cool, but we're going to start and make it really simple.
The concept of core values and culture also applies to families. A lot of people don't think that, but they sort of just go through life. I can speak to that as well, especially when my family was younger. You're just trying to survive. I had 3 kids all around the table. So you're never really thinking about who are we as a family. But I have seen families that have done that really well. And in a sense, they brand the culture of the family. Like, hey, we're the Joneses. This is who we are. Have you ever seen anybody do that from a family perspective?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you were to be in my house, you would see pictures of my family and all the things we've done. And right in the middle are our 3 core values: courage, fun, and love. And one thing that it helps with disciplining your kids. So, for instance, I have 2 boys, 18 and 15. And let's say, this happened many times, Trey, my youngest, hit TJ, my oldest. I don't just come down and say, don't hit your brother because I said so. I approach it in a different way to say, hey, bud, remember when we talked about our core values, courage, fun, and love? Do you see how that is not coming from a loving place when you're hitting your brother? Now, of course, he'll retort with whatever happened. But we get to have a conversation around what these values mean, why they're so important. When he didn't want to go do his baseball tryouts, and it's like, Dad, I don't want to do it, but he loves baseball. I'm like, hey, remember when we talked about courage being a part of our core values? I'm asking you to just show a little courage and show up today and just go put yourself out there, regardless of what happens. When you can have these conversations with one another, it makes it so much easier. Like, I'm not pointing at him and saying he's not courageous. I'm saying, hey, bud, remember how you decided, or we decided as a family that courage, fun, and love were going to be our three? I'm asking you to just show a little courage and show up to those baseball tryouts. And now he's like, you know what, Dad, I can do that. It changes everything from here's why I don't want to go, they're new kids, I'm scared, to now I just need to show a little courage, and next thing you know, he's loving baseball and he's off and running. And so, yeah, man, we believe in it. We have it up on our wall, and it's something that has been extremely beneficial for our family.
Oh, Jam, that is gold. That's fantastic. Anyone listening, if you have children, this is worth the price of admission. Not that you had to pay to listen to this podcast, but even if you did, this would be the gold nugget right here, is having values for your family. I love that. Courage, fun, love. Fantastic. It's interesting what you said also about how it changes how you discipline your kids. And it's the same in a company. So one of the things that I find when we go into companies is one of the things that's often missing is accountability, especially if we go into like a manufacturing company, and it creates a lot of disengagement for people. Somebody's working hard, and then they see someone beside them who gets away with stuff that they shouldn't get away with because they're not being held accountable. People don't hold people accountable because they are afraid of potentially what happens with the conversation. And this is where a strong value set is so important, because, again, you don't have to be the policeman all the time. You are just reorienting people. So much of leadership is that, right? It's just we're supposed to be going north and we're off a few degrees. Let's tap that back into place. And that north, that's those values. So it completely changes how you discipline, how you hold people accountable. You're calling them to the values.
Yeah, I love that. And, it's funny coming from leadership coaches. I don't know where you land on this, but for me, in a company, the strongest form of leadership isn't coming from the top. It's really that peer leadership. When I see companies that are really doing well, it is that accountability amongst one another to say, look, we're going to lift each other up, what I call EPR, encourage, praise, and recognize, and we're going to hold each other accountable to what we all agreed to. Because ultimately, if James performs, that's good for me because, we're working on the team together. If he's not picking up the slack, or I'm not picking up the slack, I'm going to see it much faster than the superior or whomever it is. So that peer leadership part, that's gold, man. When you can have the team, as you said, self-policing itself, that makes everything go so much easier, and that's when you see companies really thrive.
For sure, and that's where those values come in, because that way somebody is just holding their peer to the value that everyone agreed for. Let's take the example of your family, right? One of your kids could call you or your wife out on one of the values because it's the value, right? There's a transparency there. I think that's what's so powerful. We were working with this one company where it was in manufacturing, and there was a group of team leads, and I'm talking with them, and I had been working with all their bosses at the supervisor level, and I asked them, do you think your bosses are changing? And the one guy was like, no, I don't think my boss is changing at all. I was like, really? Okay, tell me more, since I'm working with your boss. So anyways, he went on to say he needed help with some things and he was never getting it. And I said, well, why doesn't he help you? And he's like, well, I don't know. I was like, well, why don't you talk to him? He says, well, it's not my job to tell him how to do his job. And so I had said to him, but wait a minute, are you a leader in this plant? And he said, yes. And I said, well, it's a leader's job to make the whole organization successful, whatever you need to do. So what do you need to do in this setting? And so it was an example of not telling someone, you got to do this, versus who are you, right? Which is another form of values is when we point back to our identity. And then he was like, okay, I'll talk to him. And so he did. And the good news was the supervisor handled it great. The supervisor was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Tell me what you need from me. But for that young leader, it was this change of, oh, I can't just sit on and complain. I'm a leader, which means I have to take this action because there's this higher value that's pulling it. So yeah, I'm a big believer in having clear values. I love the story about forgetting the 2 values as an executive and then changing it from 3. So good for you on that.
Yeah, what I love about what you just said, especially with the younger leader, hierarchically speaking, not as high, the leader that he approached, or he or she approached, said, I had no idea. And isn't that the truth? We don't know how we show up to the rest of the world, right? We don't have a mirror showing us exactly how we show up. And so what a gift for that leader. I love the way you said it. Are you a leader in this company? Which the truth is, everyone listening to this podcast, everyone in a company is a leader. But what a gift that person gave their superior to say, hey, FYI, I could use your support, or you're showing up this way. And the response was so good. I had no idea, because it's like leaving an answer on a voicemail. I think my voice sounds a certain way, and then I hear it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's how I sound. But that's the way the world is interpreting is so much different than how we think we're showing up. So what an absolute gift.
For sure. Well, listen, JM, I really appreciate you being on the show and taking the time out here for us. If people want to get a hold of you, maybe have you come into their company or talk to their leaders, where should they look for you?
Yeah, brother, thank you so much. So letsgowin.com would be the easiest way to find me, connect. You can certainly always send an email to info@letsgowin.com. And here's what I would say. You know what? I'm taking on a one client every other month. That's what I committed to in 2025. I said, I can really, 6 this year, I can really pour into. That doesn't mean every company, right? That means we're going to be very selective. But I love doubling or tripling the revenue with these partnerships. So I would love for people to reach out, see if, hey, man, I want to triple my revenue. Cool. Let's see if we're a good fit. If we are, we can have a conversation. If we're not, no worries. But just having those conversations. So letsgowin.com would be the easiest spot, or, Let's Go Win podcast. I assume, James, we're having you on as a guest. I imagine we'll talk out off the air, but I really enjoyed being on the show, brother. What a host you are.
It's great to have you here. And I always appreciate people who continually evolve and share their journey as they go, which is something which is exactly what you're doing. Also appreciate people who are helping leaders, because it's, I always say that leadership isn't complicated, but it's not always easy. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of growth. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of dealing with your own ego. And you're walking with people to help them do that. So I really appreciate that. Anyways, JM, great to meet you. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.